Ethan stood at the airport gate, tension humming in the air like an electric charge. He could see Jess, her arms crossed, staring at him with disappointment etched across her face. They had come to the airport to catch a flight together, but everything had unraveled in a matter of minutes. Jess had declared she was done. "Just leave," she had said, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and sadness. Ethan felt his stomach drop. It was like a cold hand had wrapped around his heart. He wanted to plead, to explain, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he stood there frozen, watching the other passengers hustle by, oblivious to the storm brewing between them. Jess was frustrated. Their lives had become a series of arguments, small explosions igniting over nothing. Who left the lights on, who forgot to buy the groceries. They were like two ships passing in the night, drifting further apart, and now felt like they were bringing out the worst in each other. He could see her brow furrowed, and he related that expression all too well. It mirrored his own feelings of helplessness. The truth was, he didn't want to leave. He loved her, and the more he stood there, the clearer it became he had to fight for her. "Jess, please," he murmured, but it sounded weak even to his ears. The voice of the flight attendant broke through the tension. "Attention, passengers." Ethan could barely concentrate on the words. His eyes were glued to Jess, who turned away, shaking her head. That gesture felt like a solid wall closing in around him. He remembered their first meeting, how magical it had felt, how they had laughed over coffee until the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with orange and purple, and yet here they were, standing on the precipice of separation. She snapped, her voice rising above the crowd. In a moment of desperation, he blurted out, "What if I really did go?" Her arms dropped to her sides, the fight leaving her for a moment. Ethan took a step back, stunned by her words. For a second, something deep inside him felt like it was breaking, but just as he was about to turn away, something unexpected happened. A voice behind him cut through the chaos. He turned to see the pilot of the flight standing there. The man wore a crisp uniform, his demeanor confident yet warm. Ethan glanced at Jess, her expression shifting, surprise flickering across her face. "Yes, I am," he replied, his heart racing. The pilot smiled kindly. "It's easy to forget what matters in the hustle and bustle of travel. Life is short, my friend." There was something about the way he spoke, something that lingered in the air. Jess looked at the pilot, then back at Ethan, her eyes searching for meaning. It was as if the pilot's presence had cast a different light over their conversation. "Sometimes a moment is all it takes," the pilot continued, his voice calm. Ethan felt those words sink into his heart. They weren't simply words from a stranger, they were a lifeline. He shifted his gaze back to Jess, whose defiance began to soften. "I know it's been hard," he started, his voice steadier now. "What I want to say is I'm ready to fight for us. I can't fix everything overnight, but we can work through the mess together." Jess's eyes glimmered with emotions battling within her. She began, her voice breaking. "No, just listen," he urged, feeling an urgency within him. "I don't want to walk away." The pilot nodded slightly, as if giving Ethan silent encouragement. For a split second, Ethan felt like the world fell away. There was no crowded gate, no ticking clock, just Jess and him. "I don't want to give up," Ethan pressed, his heart racing. Hearing those words seemed to draw Jess closer, her defenses weakening. She looked at the pilot, who gave a gentle smile, a knowing look that made Ethan feel like the universe was on his side. "You may think you're not important," the pilot said, speaking to both of them, "but you are. Remember that love is not just a feeling, it's a choice." In that moment, something magical sparked between Ethan and Jess. She took a deep breath, her walls crumbling. I'm scared," she confessed quietly. "I'm scared of getting hurt again." Ethan stepped closer, closing the gap between them. "I'm scared too," he admitted, "but I believe we can do this together." Tears began to pool in her eyes, and she wiped them away angrily. "But we can rebuild that trust," Ethan insisted, feeling a fierce determination. The pilot, now slightly in the background, caught Ethan's eye. "What you're doing is brave," he said gently. Jess looked around, and for the first time it was like all the noise from the airport faded into the background. Her gaze met Ethan's again, and he could see the internal struggle within her between holding on and letting go. "Maybe we just need to start fresh," Jess said, her voice trembling. "Maybe I need to stop thinking of all the reasons we can't make this work." "It's the only way," Ethan replied, a cautious hope lighting his chest. Finally, a small smile broke through the tears on Jess's face. "I think I'd like that," she said softly. At that moment, the pilot cleared his throat, bringing the focus back to him. "If you two are ready, Flight 207 is about to take off." Ethan felt lighter somehow, the burden that had weighed heavily on him only moments ago lifting. He grabbed Jess's hand gently, intertwining their fingers. She nodded, and together they walked toward the gate, leaving behind the weight of the arguments and the pain. As they walked, the pilot turned to them one last time. "Remember, allow each other to be vulnerable." Ethan felt those words resonate within him. Vulnerability was indeed a gift, a chance to show the parts of themselves that they often hid. As they approached the plane, Jess leaned in closer, her breath warm against his ear. Ethan squeezed her hand tighter. They boarded the plane, the familiar smell of jet fuel and the sound of engines revving filling their senses. As they settled into their seats, Jess smiled over at him, her eyes sparkling with something new, perhaps hope, perhaps love. Later, as the plane ascended into the clouds, Ethan felt the tension of the moment dissolve. It was the beginning of their journey together, a chance to restart their love story with honesty and vulnerability. In that quiet moment, both of them realized life would always pose challenges, but facing them together made all the difference. It wasn't just about the easy days, it was about standing side by side through the storms, reminding each other that love was worth fighting for. Every flight has its turbulence, every journey its ups and downs. But as Ethan grasped Jess's hand, they both knew they had chosen to be on this path together. And in that certainty, they found a renewed strength they didn't know they had. In the blink of an eye, everything had changed, all because a pilot had called him sir, and an unexpected moment ignited a passion to hold on a little tighter. Her voice echoed in the bustling airport, slicing through the crowd like a knife. Ethan stood there, stunned, his heart racing as if he had just run a marathon. Jess, the woman he thought he knew inside and out, was pushing him away, her eyes flashing with a mix of anger and hurt. They had traveled so far together on this journey, only to find themselves at an impasse. The airport hummed with chatter as families reunited and travelers prepared for distant adventures. Yet in that moment, felt as if the world had paused, holding its breath for what came next. Ethan's eyes darted around, searching for a familiar face, but all he saw were shadowy silhouettes of strangers blissfully unaware of the storm brewing between him and Jess. He managed to choke out, his chest tight. All around him, the sounds of rolling suitcases and boarding announcements faded into an ominous silence. She took a step back, her arms crossed defiantly across her chest. Because I can't keep pretending everything is okay. Her words landed heavy between them, each syllable a stone cast into the pool of their shared past. Ethan felt like he'd been punched in the gut. He thought of the countless late nights they spent wrapped in each other's arms and the dreams they once shared. But lately, all he felt were echoes of unmet expectations. He pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. Don't walk away, I can fix this. Another chance. Her voice cracked, revealing the hurt buried beneath layers of frustration. In that moment, something shifted between them. Jess's vulnerability was raw and real. Ethan took a deep breath, gathering the strength to speak. I've been lost, but I'm trying to find my way back to you. Their gazes locked, and for a fleeting moment, Ethan believed he could reach her. But then, disappointment flashed across her face, and she shook her head. No, just leave. His heart sank, the weight of her words pressing down on him like an anchor. Was this really happening? How had they drifted so far apart? His mind churned with memories, the laughter, the tender moments in stark contrast to the tension that now gripped their relationship. Suddenly, the voice of the flight attendant broke through the haze. Attention passengers, the announcement rang out, a reminder that life was moving on even as they stood still. Ethan felt a surge of panic. If he walked away now, would he ever get another chance? Just when he thought he might turn back, a voice behind him caught his attention. Turning around, he found himself face to face with the pilot of the flight. The pilot's crisp uniform was striking against the dull backdrop of the terminal, and his presence commanded a certain authority. The pilot's eyes moved between Ethan and Jess, assessing the situation like it was a puzzle that needed solving. Ethan, feeling a mixture of confusion and hope, nodded slowly. The pilot's demeanor shifted, becoming warm yet firm. Listen, I've seen many couples go through tough moments before a journey. Jess cast a sidelong glance at the pilot, her expression softening just a fraction. Ethan seized the moment, stepping forward. I don't want to walk away, but I feel like I'm losing her. The pilot turned to Jess, his tone gentle but unwavering. And you, is this really how you want it to end? Ethan felt Jess's eyes on him, searching for answers. The pilot's words seemed to resonate with her, the facade of anger beginning to crack. There was something grounding about the way the pilot carried himself. He spoke not just from authority, but from experience. Life is short, the pilot continued, and love is worth fighting for. Everything shifted again. Ethan remembered why he fell in love with Jess, her passion, her spirit. But somewhere along the way, they got lost in misunderstandings. In the midst of this turmoil, he felt a spark of hope ignite within him. Jess, he said, his voice steady now, I know I've messed up. I haven't been the partner you deserve, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this right. Her eyes betrayed a hint of vulnerability that made Ethan's heart race. It's just so hard, Jess confessed, taking a step toward him. I don't want to cause you pain, he replied, desperation woven into every word. I want to be someone you can rely on, someone who lifts you up, not brings you down. As if sensing the shift in their energy, the pilot interjected once more. Every relationship has its storms. What matters is how you weather those storms together. It's a choice to stay and fight or to walk away. He paused, allowing his words to settle in the air between them. Jess's gaze drifted to the floor, deep in thought. Time seemed to elongate, stretching out as Ethan waited, holding his breath, praying she wouldn't turn away. Jess began, her voice barely a whisper. Maybe we could try to fix this. There's a beauty in the journey, the pilot said, a knowing smile crossing his face. Embrace it. Ethan nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. I can do that. I want to hear you, every part of you. Jess looked up, her eyes gleaming with unshed tears. I've been so afraid to say how I feel. Let's push through together, he replied firmly, feeling the bonds between them begin to mend even in that crowded airport. At that moment, the pilot's presence felt almost like a gift, nudging them back toward the light. "Now, if you two are ready," the pilot declared, gesture toward the gate. "Flight 207 is about to take off." Ethan reached for Jess's hand, threading his fingers through hers, their connection reigniting hope within him. He asked, a tentative smile curling his lips. With a small nod, Jess allowed him to lead her toward the gate, leaving behind the weight of their previous arguments. The murmur of travelers faded into the background as they crossed the threshold, taking their first collective step toward healing. As they boarded the plane, the hum of engines filled the air, a soothing background to their fresh start. Jess turned to Ethan, a mix of apprehension and hope glimmering in her eyes. She whispered, "We will," he assured her, gripping her hand tighter. They settled into their seats, the vibrations of the aircraft reminding them that this journey wasn't merely physical, it was emotional too. Everything felt different now, lighter. As the plane took off, the sky ahead painted with rosy hues of dawn, Ethan imagined their future stretched out before them, vast and unwritten. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but the fight was worth it, love was worth it, and as Jess leaned against his shoulder, a newfound warmth enveloped them. They exchanged a quiet understanding, realizing it wasn't just about destination, it was about how they would travel together. Growing closer with each passing moment, they both knew the path ahead might curve into shadows at times, but together they would face the fears that had threatened to tear them apart. In the end, they were not just passengers on a flight. They were partners mounting an expedition, ready to confront the turbulence ahead and embrace every moment, because love wasn't merely a feeling, it was their choice day by day to stand beside each other. And just like that, with the pilot's wise words echoing in the recesses of their hearts, they soared above the clouds, ready to take on a world filled with possibilities. Jess shouted, her voice rising above the bustling airport noise. Ethan stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest. All around them, families reunited, friends embraced, and travelers rushed toward their gates, oblivious to the emotional earthquake ripping through him. In that moment, the world had spun into slow motion. He could feel the air around him thickening, heavy with unspoken words and unresolved tension. Jess's face was flushed, frustration boiling over into something deeper. Ethan asked, desperation creeping into his voice. The familiar outlines of their lives together flickered in his mind, the quiet dinners, laughter shared over late-night movies, the dreams they had woven in whispered words. But now all of that felt distant, like fading echoes of a happier time. Jess shot back, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, as if to shield herself from his presence. "You never listened to me." Ethan's chest tightened, her words striking him like arrows. Each one pierced through the armor he had built around his heart. He had sensed her distance, but he hadn't realized it had come to this. He glanced around the packed terminal, feeling the eyes of strangers on them, caught in their private storm. "Please, Jess, let's talk." The noise from the airport faded into a dull roar, like the rush of blood in his ears. Jess shook her head, that small movement like a dagger thrusting deeper into him. "I'm done talking." Every word felt like it dug into his heart, propelling him into confusion and despair. How had they ended up here? He couldn't shake the memories of the nights filled with warmth and laughter, the bond they had built. This moment felt surreal, as if they were actors in a tragic play. Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, he simply stood there, taking in what felt like the end of everything they had built. There was a chaotic energy around them, families reuniting, children squealing with delight, a couple sweetly holding hands as they checked their flight status. It all felt so far away from the emotional battlefield Ethan found himself on. Suddenly, a voice broke through the tension. Ethan turned to see a pilot standing nearby, his uniform sharply pressed and radiating a sense of calm authority even amidst the chaos. The man's eyes were warm, and for a moment they drew Ethan in like a lifeline. Ethan replied, his voice almost lost in the crowd. The pilot asked, gesturing to Jess. His tone was neither accusatory nor overly friendly. It felt grounded, perceptive somehow. Ethan nodded, catching Jess's eye, searching for any glimmer of understanding. She looked caught off guard, the pilot's presence shifting the energy between them. The pilot continued, his voice steady and clear. "Listen, I see a lot of couples in the airport, and I've learned a few things over the years. Love, like flying, can be turbulent." Ethan felt a small spark of hope ignite within him. Maybe this man could somehow help bridge the chasm growing between them. "I don't want to walk away," Ethan said, his voice stronger now, "but I'm scared I might." The pilot turned to Jess, his gaze softening. "And what about you? Is this really how you want to end things?" Jess hesitated, her defenses wavering for a moment. It was as if in that instant the chaos around them faded, allowing their conversation to take center stage. "I just don't think we can work through this," she confessed, her voice trembling. "Sometimes a journey needs a little turbulence to remind you how important the destination is," the pilot said, wisdom flowing from his voice. Ethan took a step forward, the inhale of hope filling his lungs. "Jess, we've been through too much to just walk away." A flicker of emotion crossed Jess's face, a mixture of doubt and curiosity. She looked at the pilot, then back at Ethan, her heart clearly caught in the crossfire of their past and future. Maybe we just need to start fresh, she said softly, her voice less sharp and more vulnerable. But it's going to take time and effort. That's the point, Ethan replied earnestly. We can't go back. The pilot glanced from Ethan to Jess, his expression a blend of encouragement and support. You have to be willing to take that leap of faith. In that moment, the weight of uncertainty began to lift. Jess's posture softened, her arms relaxing slightly as she absorbed Ethan's words. Maybe he was right. Maybe there was still a chance for them. I'm scared, Jess admitted, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Scared of getting hurt again. Ethan stepped closer, almost instinctively reaching for her hand. I promise to listen, to hear you out no matter how hard it is. Jess glanced at the pilot, a flicker of doubt still lingering. But can we really fix this? Trust takes time, but it's built through actions, not just words, the pilot explained. And both of you are here ready to face this. For the first time in what felt like ages, Ethan saw a glimmer of hope in Jess's eyes. I think I want to try, she said slowly, an almost tentative smile breaking through the clouds of hurt. With a shared resolve, they turned to the pilot, a tacit acknowledgement that this moment, against all odds, was altering their path. Thank you, Ethan said, sincere gratitude stretching between them and the pilot. No need for thanks, the pilot replied, his smile warm. But remember, every journey has its takeoffs and landings. As the pilot stepped back, signaling it was time for boarding, Ethan and Jess looked at each other, happiness cautiously creeping in. Ethan asked, his heart pounding. I'm not sure, but I want to be, Jess replied. Hand in hand, they walked toward the gate, each step reinforcing the moment. As they entered the plane, the rush of air and the smell of jet fuel ignited a new feeling within Ethan, possibility. Settled in their seats, Jess turned to him, her expression serious yet hopeful. Ethan took a deep breath, grounding himself in the moment. Next, we learn, we listen. She nodded, a flicker of determination shining through her initial uncertainty. All right then. As the plane taxied down the runway, Ethan intertwined his fingers with Jess's, feeling a sense of unity forming, growing stronger than the pain from before. The roar of engines filled the cabin, and as they lifted off the ground, a wave of exhilaration surged through him. Above the clouds, far from the chaos that once consumed them, Ethan knew they had made a choice, a commitment to fight for each other in the face of uncertainty. With every shared glance, every gentle squeeze of their hands, the distance that had once threatened to consume them began to fade. Slowly, they were weaving tangles of understanding, reconnecting not just as partners, but as two people healing together. In time, as their journey continued, they learned to embrace vulnerability. They faced uncomfortable conversations, shared their dreams and fears, and yes, sometimes stumbled along the way. But with each hurdle, they chose to rise, reinforcing their bond with every challenge they faced. And as the flight moved through the sky, so too did their hearts navigate toward a place of reconciliation, learning that love wasn't just about the good times. It was about standing together through the storms, finding peace and understanding in the chaos. The pilot's words lingered in the air, a gentle reminder that love could flourish, even in the most turbulent of times. It took courage, patience, and a willingness to embrace vulnerability. As they flew high above the clouds toward a new destination together, they knew their journey had only just begun. Every moment weighed against their past would be the foundation for a richer, deeper love built on trust, understanding, and a heartfelt commitment to one another. In the end, navigating life together became not just a choice, but their magnificent adventure. Jess's voice rang out across the crowded airport terminal, cutting through the clamor like a knife. Ethan felt his heart drop, pounding in his ears as a wave of shock washed over him. How had they reached this point? It was a scene he had never envisioned, their world crumbling in the middle of a bustling hub of travelers, families embracing and flights being announced. Time seemed to slow as the chaos of the terminal faded, leaving only the two of them in their personal maelstrom. Jess stood there, arms crossed defiantly, her eyes flashing with hurt and anger. With every ounce of her frustration, she looked ready to push him away forever. He stammered, searching her face for any trace of the love they had shared. How had things spiraled so far out of control? Just last week, they were laughing over coffee, sharing dreams, their plans still bright in their minds. She shot back, her voice cracking. I feel ignored and unappreciated. Each word landed on Ethan like a punch, the gravity of her emotions weighing down on him. He instinctively cast a glance around them, noticing strangers turning to watch the unfolding drama. The laughter, the excitement, the reunions, all foreign to him now as they faced the wreckage of their relationship. Please, Jess, he pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. I want to talk. Jess shook her head, fire in her eyes. Talk is cheap. How long have we been having the same conversation? Nothing changes. Ethan felt the ground beneath him shift. Each accusation seemed to unearth memories like skeletons from the closet. How had he let it get this bad? He remembered the moments they had built together, dancing in the living room, midnight snacks, cozy nights filled with laughter. It all felt so distant now. Let's not do this here, he said softly, urging her to reconsider. But Jess's eyes were clouded, disappointment etching deeper lines on her face. I'm done waiting for you to wake up, just go. Panic surged within him as he could feel her resolve solidifying like a wall between them. He had never felt so helpless. He opened his mouth to protest again, but before he could muster any words, a calm, authoritative voice broke through the noise surrounding them. Ethan turned around to see a pilot standing just a few feet away. The crisp uniform, the polished shoes, even the slight grin seemed to be soaked in quiet confidence. Ethan hadn't expected this interruption, but somehow it felt like a lifeline. Ethan responded, unsure of what to expect. The pilot asked, eyeing Jess with a knowing glance. Ethan felt a flicker of hope and glanced back at Jess. She looked taken aback, the fierceness in her expression dimming slightly at the stranger's approach. "Yes, he is," Jess replied, her tone now muted, as if caught off guard. The pilot shifted his gaze between them, sensing the tension swirling in the air. "I can see this is a difficult moment for you both," the pilot said, his voice steady. Ethan held his breath. He didn't know who this man was, but he felt the weight of his words bearing down on them in a good way. "Relationships, much like flying, can be unpredictable," the pilot said, his tone calm yet assertive. "Turbulence is part of the journey." The way he spoke resonated with Ethan, sparking a flicker of realization. Maybe, just maybe, this man had stumbled upon them for a reason. Jess looked at the pilot, her defenses wavering. "That's easy for you to say. You're not the one going through this," she replied, her voice losing some of its fire but still guarded. "No, I'm not," the pilot acknowledged, nodding empathetically. "But let me tell you something. The moments before boarding a flight are critical." Ethan felt Jess's eyes bore into him, searching for meaning. She asked, vulnerability creeping into her voice. "Change doesn't happen overnight," the pilot replied, a hint of warmth in his tone. "It's a process, and both of you have to be willing to embrace it. Flaws and all, you're here facing each other instead of turning away." Ethan could feel something shifting. He took a breath, feeling the urgency of the moment flow through him. This man was facing them both, but Ethan was ready to step into the light. "Jess, I know I've let you down. I've lost track of what's really important, but I want to rebuild. I want to listen." For the first time, Ethan noticed a flicker of something in Jess's eyes, hesitation mixed with hope. "It's not about chasing," the pilot interjected gently. "It's about standing your ground together." Ethan captured Jess's gaze, desperation turning into determination. "I don't want to lose you, Jess. I've made mistakes, but I'm ready to change." The pilot's words hung in the air like a challenge. Jess took a small step forward, her defenses softening. "Maybe I've been too quick to blame," she said quietly, "but I need you to promise me you'll really try." "Yes," Ethan vowed, feeling the weight of her eyes on him. "I promise to work on this." Finally, a small smile crept onto Jess's face, the warmth breaking through the icy facade that had built up between them over the past few months. "It's going to take time," she warned, a hint of mischief dancing in her eyes. "I'm willing to take that time," he replied, relief washing over him. As Jess and Ethan shared a moment, the pilot cleared his throat, signaling that it was time to move forward. "Flight 207 is about to board." They looked at each other and then at the pilot, both feeling an inexplicable gratitude toward this man who had somehow walked into their lives in an airport and altered the course of their journey. "Thank you," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. Jess nodded in agreement, her gratitude apparent. "Safe travels," the pilot replied, a knowing smile on his face. As they made their way toward the gate, Ethan felt a lightness in his heart he hadn't experienced in ages. A sense of purpose that had eluded him was finally returning. There was no guarantee that everything would be easy from here. But standing there in the presence of their shared determination, they began to feel hope breathe life into their relationship once more. With each footstep, they both knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be bumps along the way, disagreements, misunderstandings, perhaps even moments of doubt, but they would face it all together. They boarded the plane hand in hand, settling into their seats side by side. The flight attendants moved through the aisles, preparing for takeoff, and Ethan found himself stealing glances at Jess, her expression now a mix of hope and introspection. She whispered, leaning slightly closer as if sharing a secret. Ethan clasped her hand tighter. "Next, we learn from each other. We face each day willing to listen, willing to change." As the plane prepared for takeoff, the roar of the engines filled the cabin. Jess turned to face him fully. "I need you to understand that I can't go back to what we were," she said, her voice determined but soft. "Neither can I," Ethan replied, a newfound fire blazing within him. As the plane lifted off the runway and into the open sky, Ethan felt a surge of exhilaration. High above the world, they found a new perspective, a freedom that came with their renewed commitment to one another. Together, they were ready for this journey. With the clouds beneath them, it was a reminder of the uncertainties that lay ahead, but also of the beauty in flight. The skies were vast and unexplored. In their shared silence, they felt grounded, finding solace in the knowledge that they had chosen to navigate this tumultuous journey together. And though it would take time and dedication, they now held the key to reshape their love. They soared above the clouds, navigating through the vast unknown of their lives. They understood that love was not just a destination. It was about reveling in the journey, learning to trust one another, and embracing every storm that might come their way. Ethan looked at Jess, a contented smile breaking across his face. And as she smiled back, he knew the turbulence would not define them. It would just be a part of their flight, one that they would embark upon together, sharing in every moment and truly soaring high. Jess shouted, her voice cutting through the crowded airport like a knife. Ethan felt his heart drop, the sound echoing eerily as people around them began to glance over. How had they got to this moment in public with so many eyes watching? With her arms crossed tightly against her chest, Jess embodied a mix of anger and resignation. Tears pooled in her eyes, but anger held them back, fierce, unrelenting anger. Ethan stood there, frozen and unsure of what to say, feeling the weight of dread settle over him. He pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. "We can talk about this." But Jess shook her head, her expression as hard as steel. "Talk? We've been talking for months. Nothing changes, Ethan." Each word felt like a punch, striking deep and leaving him reeling. The noise of the airport bustling around them, the laughter, the announcements, families greeting one another seemed to fade away until it was just the two of them standing on a precipice. Ethan's mind raced back to happier days, to the laughter shared over pizza, whispered secrets in bed, the spark that had ignited their romance. Where had that been lost? "Please," he implored, stepping closer. "Let's not do this here. We can work through this." Jess shouted back, her voice rising, drawing the attention of more onlookers. "You say the same things, but nothing really changes." Ethan's resolve wavered. He could feel the ground beneath him shifting. Every accusation she threw felt like a truth he had been avoiding. Each moment of silence stretched painfully, and for a brief second, all he could do was stare into Jess's eyes, searching for a hint of the love they once shared. She yelled again, and this time Ethan felt his heart splinter. He opened his mouth to respond, but the words caught in his throat. But then from somewhere behind him, a voice broke through the tension surrounding them. Ethan turned to see a pilot standing there, his uniform crisp and pressed, exuding an air of authority and calm that felt almost out of place amid their turmoil. The pilot's eyes darted between Ethan and Jess, and for a moment the chaos of their argument faded away. Ethan replied, confusion painting his voice. The pilot asked, gesturing gently toward Jess. Ethan glanced back at Jess, who was now looking at the pilot as if weighing whether to open her heart in front of a stranger. She nodded, her anger muted, as if the pilot's presence had drawn some of the fire out of her. "Yes," he said, finding strength in the pilot's steady demeanor. The pilot took a step closer, his tone soft yet firm. "I can see tension between you two. Relationships can have rough patches, just like flying can have turbulence." Jess's eyes flicked back to Ethan, and for the first time there was uncertainty there. She murmured, her defenses momentarily crumbling. The pilot smiled understandingly. "I've seen many couples in airports just like you." Jess asked, a whisper of doubt coloring her voice. "It's not just a matter of fear," the pilot replied, his words measured and thoughtful. "It's about communication, understanding what's truly important." Ethan took in those words, feeling a flicker of hope rising within him. "Jess, I hear what you're saying," he said, his tone earnest. "I know things haven't been right between us, and I want to do better." Jess looked at him, her expression softening just a touch. The pilot spoke again, and for the moment he felt like a wise counselor standing between them. "Look, it's easy to feel lost when life gets chaotic. But understand this, relationships require active participation." "I'm willing to engage," Ethan said, feeling a swell of determination, "but I need you to tell me what you want." Silence hung in the air, thick and charged, as Jess processed his words. She glanced back at the pilot, who nodded as if giving her permission to open up. "I don't want to feel like I'm the only one fighting for us," she said finally, her voice quiet yet resolute. Ethan felt his chest tighten. "Never meant to make you feel that way, it's just I've been overwhelmed too. I thought things would work themselves out, but I see how wrong I was." The pilot silently nodded, giving them a moment to take in the weight of their truths. "That's the starting point then. I wish I could believe that we could turn this around," Jess said, her voice trembling but hopeful. "I do mean it," Ethan insisted, feeling a small ember of hope light within him. "If you'll give me a chance, I promise to work harder." The pilot glanced at both of them, sensing the formalities had dropped into something more sincere. "Then take this leap of faith, you're already here together." Ethan watched as Jess weighed his words, her face softening with understanding. "Maybe there's still something worth saving here," she admitted, a hint of vulnerability in her voice, "but it won't be easy. Time is what we make of it," Ethan replied, the air around them feeling lighter. "I'm willing to start fresh." For a brief moment Jess smiled, the remnants of anger slowly dissipating. "Okay," she nodded, taking a step closer. "We can try." As they stood there, vulnerability creeping in, the pilot's presence felt like a guide, leading them toward a new path. "If you two are ready," he said, gesturing toward the boarding line, "Flight 207 is about to take off." Ethan took Jess's hand, feeling a warmth spread through him. Together they stepped toward the gate, their hands intertwined, the connection now electric. As they moved past the crowd, the chaos and noise became a blur, and they found a new rhythm together, walking with purpose. They boarded the plane, still hand in hand, and as they settled into their seats, Ethan felt both nervous and exhilarated. Jess asked, curiosity sparkling in her eyes. "Next, we keep talking," Ethan replied, gently squeezing her hand. "We face the good and the bad together." The plane began a taxi, the roar of engines filling the cabin and excitement bubbling in the air. As they took off, leaving the ground behind, Ethan felt a surge of anticipation. Above the clouds, they could finally breathe, surrounded by endless sky. "I need you to promise me something," Jess said suddenly, her expression serious. "Anything," Ethan replied, his heart racing. "That we won't lose each other again," she said, her voice unwavering. "I promise," Ethan vowed, sincerity brewing within him. As they soared higher, the world below transformed, becoming a landscape of possibilities. Their past was now rippled with promise, shifting their focus to the journey ahead rather than the heartaches they had encountered. With each passing cloud, Ethan remembered the words of the pilot that turbulence was just a part of life. Together, they would learn to navigate those storms. Jess asked, her eyes brightening as she looked out the window. "Yes," Ethan agreed, hope glimmering in his chest. "We'll fill our journey with laughter and understanding." As they entered a new chapter together, Ethan felt their hearts begin to synchronize. The flight ahead would have its ups and downs, but they were resolute in their decision to move forward together. Above the clouds, free from the weight of their past misunderstandings, they saw a horizon of possibilities. In that shared space, they became buoyed by the spirit of commitment, inspired to find beauty not just in the destination, but in every moment they spent growing together. Together, they embraced the unknown, confident in their ability to thrive no matter what lay ahead. And as the aircraft soared, they knew they had taken a monumental leap toward a love reborn, ready to face whatever came next. "Just leave," Jess's voice cut through the bustling airport terminal, startling Ethan. It felt as if the entire world had paused to listen to the battle raging between them. People turned their heads, some glancing, others staring, their expressions a mix of curiosity and sympathy. Ethan stood there, frozen in disbelief, not quite able to fathom what was happening. Moments ago, they had been laughing at a joke, planning their vacation, imagining the adventures they would have together. Yet here they were on the precipice of something dark and painful. The fluorescent lights above flickered as he stumbled through his thoughts, trying to process her words. "Jess, please." The desperation in his voice caught the ear of nearby travelers, and some whispered among themselves, their glances lingering. Jess looked away, blinking rapidly to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. "You don't get it, Ethan. You never listened to me." Her voice echoed through the terminal, fierce yet tinged with a deep sadness. Just then, the sharp voice of the flight attendant broke through the noise. "Attention, all passengers." It was as if the announcement introduced an urgency into their chaotic conversation. A couple of nearby families began to gather their bags, ready to take off on their journeys, while Ethan stood paralyzed. He urged, stepping closer. Even in the chaos of the airport, this felt too intimate to share here. "No, I've had enough talking," Jess said, her voice trembling with a blend of rage and despair. Ethan felt a pang of guilt stab through him, and he thought back over the months that had led them here. There had been a million small moments when he had chosen to focus on work, on distractions, instead of her. How had it come to this? "Jess, I love you, I don't want to lose you," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. A fleeting look of uncertainty crossed Jess's face, but it quickly evaporated. "Love isn't enough anymore, your words don't match your actions." As her words sunk in, an unexpected voice interjected. Ethan turned to see a pilot standing nearby, his fresh uniform crisp against the worn terminal backdrop. The pilot's demeanor was calm, exuding an air of confidence that felt almost surreal amidst their emotional turmoil. Ethan replied, momentarily distracted from the whirlwind of anger and sadness. The pilot's gaze shifted between him and Jess. His tone was steady, almost soothing. Jess shot a quick glance at Ethan, then nodded reluctantly. "We were supposed to be," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "Look," the pilot said, "it's easy to get lost in the chaos of emotions, especially in a place like this. But I can tell you that the best journeys often come with turbulence." Ethan could feel Jess's eyes on him, searching for what? Validation, hope. The pilot's words hung in the air as if he were casting a lifeline. Jess asked, her voice wavering, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through her anger. "It's only too late if you let it be," the pilot replied, crossing his arms. "Relationships take work, both in good times and bad." Ethan listened, as if the pilot were unveiling a hidden truth. "Jess, I want to do better. I see now how I've failed you, how I've let you down. I want to fight for us even if it's uncomfortable," he said, each word infused with honest desperation. For a moment, Jess's expression softened, and it felt like the fragile air between them began to shift. "But why should I believe you?" "You've said the same things before," she replied, doubt shadowing her features. "I know my words have lost their weight, but I want to show you I can change. I don't want to keep making the same mistakes," Ethan pleaded, feeling the tension thickening around them like fog. The pilot nodded knowingly, as if acknowledging their journey with a shared wisdom. Change is a choice, but it's also a long process. Ethan felt those words resonate deep within him. Maybe this man, this stranger, was exactly what they needed to hear right now. "I promise I'll make an effort," he insisted. "I'll truly listen and I'll put in the work." Jess hesitated, losing herself in thought. Ethan could almost see the gears in her mind turning, the turmoil of her emotions playing out across her face. She finally asked, her tone a mixture of hope and skepticism. The pilot smiled gently. That's the spirit, but remember, starting fresh means being open to vulnerability. Ethan reached for Jess's hand, intertwining their fingers. I don't want to just exist together, I want to thrive. I need your actions to back up your promises, Jess replied, her voice more steady now. Then I'll show you, Ethan said firmly. The pilot observed their connection, a slight nod of approval evident on his face. If you both are willing to board this flight together, your journey can transform. There was a moment of profound silence that enveloped them, filled with the weight of unspoken feelings. The camera of life felt as if it had zoomed in within a film scene, capturing each flicker of doubt and hope in their eyes. Okay, Jess said softly, trying to meet Ethan's gaze with courage. I'll give this a chance, but it has to be real. Ethan nodded eagerly, feeling the heaviness that had plagued him start to dissipate. It will be real, I promise we'll navigate this together. The pilot smiled, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Good. He gestured towards the gate, his presence both grounding and uplifting. As they walked toward the gate, Ethan and Jess held onto each other's hands like a lifeline. The tension that had once enveloped them began to morph into something lighter, something more hopeful. Once they boarded the plane, they found their seats settling in. The hum of the engines churned around them, a familiar presence easing the nervous energy that lingered. Jess asked, her curiosity piqued as she gazed out the window, watching the world beyond grow smaller. Next, we carve out space for each other, Ethan replied, taking a deep breath. We make room for honesty, for growth. The plane began to taxi down the runway and Jess squeezed his hand tighter. Ethan turned to her, feeling a newfound sense of warmth between them. Then we learn, we pick each other up and keep going. As the plane accelerated and lifted off into the sky, Ethan marveled at the landscapes expanding beneath them. The clouds parted, revealing an endless expanse of blue, a mirror to the potential of their relationship. In a way, this feels like a new beginning, Jess said, a soft smile gracing her lips. Exactly, he replied, his eyes shining with determination. Let's not just exist, let's thrive. Jess drew in a breath, a sense of peace washing over her. The turbulence of their past, the shadows that loomed over them, began to fade as they soared higher. With every passing moment, they resided in a space of renewed understanding, no longer obstructed by fears, but anchored in a commitment to one another. As they looked at each other, they knew the road ahead would have bumps and twists, but hand in hand, they felt lighter, and the weight of their earlier conversation stayed behind them. Everything will be okay, Ethan whispered, squeezing her hand. Jess smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. As the plane climbed to cruising altitude, they settled into a rhythm between them. They shared laughter, dreams, and even touched on fears in a way that felt safe. In those moments, they learned that vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was strength. They had chosen to embark on this journey together, and as they shared each laugh and each fear, they readied themselves to embrace everything that came next, a true partnership in every sense. In the midst of their flight, they transformed their relationship into a beautiful tapestry, woven with threads of trust, love, and renewed commitment. And as the sky opened around them, soaring into the unknown, Ethan and Jess knew one thing: this was just the beginning of their adventure together, a chance to embrace life fully as partners in every sense of the word. Just go, Jess's voice echoed in the bustling airport terminal, shattering the din of chatter and rolling suitcases. Ethan felt his heart lurch. The air around them turned electric, and suddenly all eyes were on them, strangers pausing mid-conversation to witness the storm unraveling before them. He stared at her, disbelief swirling in his chest. Just moments ago, they were in line at the coffee shop, laughing over shared jokes and planning their vacation. Now they were standing at the edge of something dark and painful. He exclaimed, desperation tinging his voice as he searched her eyes for any hint of the love they once shared. She shot back, her tone dripping with anger. Every time we talk, it's the same thing, you don't listen. Her hands trembled as she spoke, fists clenching at her sides, an embodiment of the frustration and hurt bottled up inside her. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, aware of the curious gazes around them. The warmth of the coffee shop felt like a distant memory, replaced by this grim scene unfolding before the world. I can change, Jess, he urged, his voice catching in his throat. Jess replied, her voice rising, each word sharp enough to cut through the chaos of the airport. I've tried to make this work, but you make me feel like I'm invisible. A knot formed in Ethan's stomach, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. Memories cascaded through his mind, shared laughter, stolen glances, quiet moments spent together. How had he taken them for granted? How had they drifted apart? He pleaded, feeling panic start to seep into his tone, but Jess merely shook her head, disappointment etched across her features. Maybe the best thing for both of us is to walk away for a while, she said, her voice filled with finality. It echoed in the back of Ethan's mind like a haunting specter. Just as his world began to feel like it was crumbling, a calm voice cut through their turmoil. Ethan turned to see a pilot standing beside them, his crisp uniform a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding. The man's presence was grounding, radiating an air of authority that made even the thrumming tension cease for a moment. Ethan replied, bewildered at the interruption. The pilot asked, nodding toward Jess, who looked surprised by the sudden interest. Yes, Ethan answered, glancing back at Jess, her expression shifting from anger to curiosity. The pilot met Jess's eyes, then returned his gaze to Ethan. I can see you both are in the middle of a tough conversation, he said, his voice calm and soothing. Ethan felt Jess's gaze flick away, her defenses momentarily faltering. She asked, skepticism lacing her voice. I see a lot of couples in this airport, often caught in moments where emotions run high. The pilot continued, his hands clasped in front of him. The truth is, life can be complicated and relationships can be even more so, but the key to resolving conflicts often lies in communication. Jess shifted on her feet, her arms uncrossing slightly, revealing a hint of vulnerability that flickered in her eyes. She asked, her tone softer now but still guarded. Well, I fly people every day and I've learned a thing or two about obstacles. Turbulence is part of flying, just like conflict is a part of relationships, the pilot replied. But it's how you choose to handle it that matters. Ethan's heart raced as he took in the pilot's words. Perhaps this stranger had a point. Jess, I'm here, he said, turning to her with renewed conviction. I want to get through this with you. I'll put in the work. A flicker of hope ignited in Jess's eyes, but doubt still clouded her expression. I can't promise that everything will be perfect overnight, Ethan admitted, emotion catching in his throat, but I can promise that I'll start listening. The pilot nodded approvingly as if sensing the shift in their conversation. That's a good start, but remember, both parties must be willing to change. A moment hung in the air, thick with unspoken fears and desires. Jess looked at Ethan, searching for answers, the earlier anger draining from her face. She asked softly, her voice trembling slightly. I think you want to feel heard and valued, the pilot said gently. Jess exclaimed, her passion returning. I want to feel like I'm more than a background character in this relationship. I see you, Ethan said firmly, squeezing her hand. I want to be someone who supports you, who lifts you up. The pilot regarded them, his expression approving. You both have taken a significant step forward, but taking those steps requires courage. I don't want to run anymore, Jess said, a newfound determination ignited within her. Ethan felt his heart swell with relief. Then let's start fresh. The pilot smiled warmly. That sounds promising. He gestured toward the gate, the sound of the boarding announcement resonating with newfound energy. They lifted their hands, intertwined, and made their way toward the gate together. The weight of their previous conversation began to lighten, and with each step, a sense of renewed purpose filled the space between them. Thank you, Ethan said, glancing back at the pilot as they walked. Just remember this feeling, the pilot replied, a hint of a smile on his face. Once they boarded the plane and found their seats, the bustle of the airport faded into the background. Jess settled into her seat beside Ethan, her eyes betraying a mixture of relief and apprehension. She asked, her voice small yet hopeful. Next, we face our journey together, Ethan answered, his heart racing with the excitement of possibility. We will keep talking, keep confronting our fears, and keep moving forward. The plane started to taxi and Jess took a deep breath. I'm terrified of making mistakes, she admitted quietly. Me too, Ethan said, his voice steady and reassuring. But mistakes are part of growth. As the plane picked up speed and lifted off the ground, Ethan glanced out the window, watching the world beneath them shrink away. He couldn't help but feel a rush of exhilaration. Above the clouds there lay a new world, untouched and filled with promise. Maybe this is a sign, Jess said softly, looking out at the vast blue sky. Yes, Ethan agreed, turning to her, his heart swelling with emotion. As they climbed to cruising altitude, they shared hopes and dreams, fears and insecurities, the restless energy from before replaced by something deeper, a bubble of intimacy that had been reignited. They laughed and teased each other as they always had, but now a layer of understanding painted the edges of their laughter. Each shared look held unspoken promises. They were both ready to embrace the uncertainty that lay ahead. Jess asked, her brow furrowing slightly as she met his gaze. Absolutely, Ethan replied, the confidence in his voice surprising even him. As long as we're willing to try, we'll make it. Hope flickered in her eyes. You have to, he said gently. As they settled into the rhythm of their shared journey, they faced the turbulence of their past head-on. Each disagreement became a chance to learn and grow. Every moment of doubt became a stepping stone toward understanding. They explored new depths of connection that they hadn't before. Whenever doubts crept in, Ethan reminded Jess of the moment they nearly walked away from each other, and that flicker of clarity it had sparked. Whenever Jess felt overwhelmed, Ethan would reassure her, making sure she knew she was seen. With every mile they flew above the clouds, they transformed not just as individuals, but as a couple learning to trust again. They realized that love was not just a destination, it was a continuous journey, one they were committed to exploring together. In the end, it was the pilot's timely intervention that had propelled them forward. He had reminded them that the path of love, while often rocky, was worth navigating together. It was a lesson neither would forget. As they soared high above the clouds, Ethan and Jess knew they had taken their first steps toward a love that was more profound than ever, a bond forged through honesty, vulnerability, and a shared commitment to overcoming the turbulence ahead. And as they embraced the adventure before them, a bright horizon stretched out, full of possibilities waiting to be embraced. The journey was just beginning, and they were ready for whatever lay ahead. Just live. Jess's voice shattered the calm hum of the airport terminal, plunging the bright fluorescent lights into a stark reality. Ethan felt the words slice through the air, ricocheting off the bustling background of travelers, families, and holidaymakers. Each declaration landed hard on his heart, pulling him into a downward spiral of disbelief. He forced himself to look at her, searching for the love that once radiated brightly in her eyes. But now, her eyes burned with hurt and frustration, clouds of emotion swirling just beneath the surface. Jess, he started, but the look she shot him silenced him in an instant. Don't, she snapped, her brows furrowing as if she were trying to will him to understand. Don't you dare try to talk your way out of this again. I'm tired of words that don't match actions. Every word felt like a dagger, each accusation burrowing deeper. Ethan looked around, feeling the eyes of strangers on him, judging. The happiness of nearby families and friends stood in stark contrast to the chaos brewing between them. Just moments ago, they had been planning a vacation, laughing over the prospect of adventures together. Now they stood on the verge of collapse. Please, he implored, stepping closer, his voice desperate and small. I don't want to lose you. Jess's voice rose, echoing through the high ceilings of the terminal. We've been talking. I feel like a ghost in my own life. You don't see me anymore, Ethan. A sinking feeling welled in Ethan's stomach as he let her words wash over him. There had been signs, invisible cracks in the surface of their once solid relationship, and he had ignored them, thinking everything would eventually solve itself. How could he let it get this far? Jess, I'll do better, I promise. You're everything to me, he cried, his voice trembling. She snapped. What does everything even mean if I feel so alone? I don't want to feel this way anymore, she said, her jaw clenched, the fight pouring out of her like sand through an hourglass. Just when he thought the ground might open up and swallow him whole, an unexpected voice cut through their tumult. Ethan turned to see a pilot standing nearby, sharp and authoritative in his crisp uniform. The pilot's presence felt almost surreal amid the emotional chaos. Ethan replied, bewildered but slightly hopeful. Maybe this man could diffuse the tension. The pilot asked, nodding toward Jess, who seemed momentarily taken aback by this unexpected intervention. Yes, Ethan confirmed, glancing back at Jess, who was wide-eyed at a loss for words. Listen, the pilot said, his tone steady and calm. I know this must be a tough moment for both of you, but let me tell you something I've learned flying people around the world. Relationships, much like flying, have turbulence. Ethan felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. Could the pilot's words help bridge the chasm that had suddenly opened up between them? Good advice, Jess said, her tone softened slightly as she looked at the pilot, searching for anything that might make sense of this chaos. The journey can be rough, but ignoring the problems won't make them go away, the pilot continued. If you truly want to fix this, you both need to be willing to engage and communicate. Ethan turned to Jess, feeling the intensity of the moment build. I want to engage, he said, his voice steadying. I know I've made mistakes, but I want to change. Jess looked up at him, her defenses wavering just a little. But how do you expect me to believe that? Ethan struggled for the right words, his heart racing. But I want to prove it to you, to show you how much you mean to me. I'll listen. The pilot regarded the two of them with a knowing look, sensing the shift in the air, the tension slowly melting away, replaced by something deeper and more meaningful. Then take this as a moment of clarity. If you want to navigate this journey together, you have to be vulnerable with each other. For a moment, the airport around them faded into the background, the movement of travelers a blur, as Jess considered his words. Just want to feel valued, she said quietly, the fierceness in her tone wavering. Ethan's heart ached at her honesty. You are valued. Jess glanced over at the pilot, who nodded gently. If you both are serious about working through this, you can choose to build something stronger. She took a deep breath, her resolve starting to crystallize. I don't want to fight anymore, she admitted. I just want to feel whole. Then let's do it, Ethan said, the fire of determination burning bright within him. The pilot smiled, his presence lightening the mood. Flight 207 is about to board. Ethan reached for Jess's hand, intertwining their fingers as they stepped toward the gate. This small act unexpectedly filled him with warmth. They had both taken the first steps toward mending their fractured relationship, and maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to a love worth fighting for. Once they boarded the plane and settled into their seats, the world they had left behind faded from view. Ethan could feel a mix of anticipation and uncertainty coursing through him. As the plane taxied down the runway, he caught Jess's gaze, searching for reassurance in her eyes. She asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Now we learn, we understand each other and try to rebuild our connection, Ethan replied. Let's not pretend everything is perfect. The plane took off, rising into the sky, and for the first time in weeks, Ethan felt hope bloom in his chest. Look, he said, nodding at the view outside, we're above it all now. Jess turned her gaze to the clouds outside, her expression softening. It really is beautiful, she said, the tension in her voice starting to ease. As they flew higher, they began to talk about their fears, dreams, and frustrations. With each shared thought, the distance between their hearts narrowed. They laughed, cried, and fought through the discomfort of honesty, embracing every moment together. But as the miles stretched on, a storm began to gather in the distance, a reminder that their journey still held challenges. Ethan could see flashes of lightning flickering far off, the sky darkening ominously. Jess asked, her voice tinged with apprehension as she caught sight of the brewing storm. "It won't be easy, but we can weather any storm together if we're willing to face it head-on," Ethan replied. And just as the airplane began to shake slightly, the pilot's voice came through the intercom, steady and reassuring. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're expecting some turbulence as we approach the storm ahead." The turbulence jolted them, and for a moment the plane dipped and swayed, much like their emotions had earlier. Jess's grip tightened around Ethan's hand, but he could also see determination on her face. Together they navigated through the highs and lows of the flight, just as they promised to navigate through the complexities of their relationship. But as the plane shook, a sense of foreboding filled the air. A sudden loud bang echoed through the cabin, startling passengers and raising the tension within. Jess exclaimed, eyes wide, fear momentarily eclipsing the hope they had just begun to build. "I don't know," Ethan replied, feeling a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. The pilot's calm voice came back over the intercom, reassuring everyone, "We've hit a bit of unexpected turbulence." Ethan looked at Jess, and for the first time uncertainty crept into his heart. Would they truly be able to face every storm that came their way? Then came another loud bang, and the lights flickered overhead, throwing the cabin into dimness. Passengers exchanged anxious glances, and panic rippled through the air. "Ethan," Jess said, her voice trembling, "I don't like this." What if the pilot's voice urged calm, but fear was palpable? Clenching her hand tighter, Ethan focused on Jess. "No matter what happens, I'm here." As the plane veered through the turbulence, Ethan wondered if perhaps this moment, this unexpected crisis, was the real test of their promise to one another. Would they still choose to fight for each other when faced with real danger? The next moment, an alarming jolt sent the plane veering sharply, leaving everyone breathless. The world around them felt like it was fracturing, swirling through a tempest of uncertainty. And as the chaos unfurled, leaving Ethan gripping Jess's hand more tightly than ever, he realized that this was just the beginning of their journey, a clash of love, vulnerability, and the storms that tested them. Would they remain steadfast through the turmoil? The airplane pitched forward into the heart of the storm, leaving them all hanging in the balance of what lay ahead.